At E-Road, we believe fleet management doesn't have to be problematic. It should be effortless, connected, and future-ready for your heavy-duty operation. With a reliable, accurate technology solution, you can elevate your fleet's performance, improve productivity across your business, monitor events as they happen, and reduce costs and downtime. Get on the road to better fleet management and safer, more productive operations. Go beyond the basics and visit eroad.com today.
Welcome back. It's Tuesday, and that means it's time for Loaded and Rolling. I'm your host, Thomas Wasson, trucking expert here at FreightWaves. Diving into today is going to be the science behind freight with the folks at Freight Science. And for those of you who don't know what they do, they use artificial intelligence paired with expertise to develop software that helps fleets decide what's the best load, which is a very big question. Because there's a tender, a load, a rate, a network. We're going places. But let's bring in our expert here to talk about what they're up to. It's going to be the CEO, Matt Foster of Freight Science. Matt, pleasure to have you on the show. Really awesome stuff you're working on. First off, tell us about yourself.
Sure. No, first and foremost, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here with you today. Obviously, we talked a little bit previously and share some similar backgrounds and interest in the industry. So excited about the conversation. But in terms of myself, really got into the freight industry in the mid 2000s. Was working for an advisory firm that had asked me to kind of go investigate the transportation and logistics space, where there was this $1 trillion industry, but we weren't doing much in it, although we worked with 90% of the Global 1000. And one of the things that I observed was just the lack of technology in the space. But through that process, fell in love with the industry. Ended up working for a 3PL, and then back in 2019, during the last downturn, said, there's just a better way to do this. And took a risk, stuck outside, and then started Freight Science. And here we are.
We'll talk about some of those early days. Anytime you start a company, it's one of those things where, like, I came from a startup. That first year, it's like all gas, no brakes, especially when you started before the pandemic. Tell us a little bit about that.
I don't know if it ever gets to a point where it's not all gas, no brake. I'm kind of waiting for that day to show up, but I don't know if it's anytime in the near future. To your point, it was a really interesting period when we first got started. We actually found an ideal partner at the time. USA Truck was our first customer, and we kind of went to them with some of the things that we wanted to do, from not only the tender acceptance, but also planning and dispatch, and then some other opportunities for applying advanced analytics. And they had very similar visions and ambitions at the time. And fast forward maybe 3 months into it, we start this COVID cycle. And, for us, I think for a lot of companies that would have been a killer, but for us, it actually helped in some ways. And I say that knowing how difficult it was for a period of time for a lot of folks. But it helped us because we had not only complete attention, but we had access to a lot of valuable resources and time and data and systems, thanks to their willingness to partner. And it allowed us to do a lot of great experimentation during that time frame and really get to know the processes, the problems, the people, everything else. And candidly, we're thankful that really accelerated our growth. So when the market started to recover, we were there to capture that opportunity.
That's what's so cool about the processes and how they're picking loads. I feel like trying to explain to 3/4 of this industry how large carriers book loads and do their business. It's like it's an alien concept to people. So, with a USA Truck, I came from a US Express, simulation theory talking, both start with a U. thousands of tenders coming into a
Hmm.
system. You have to accept it, decline it. Are you
Yep.
managing it? And then you have to assign it and plan it. What was it like in those with that first partnership? What were some of the big challenges that they were just facing? Because it feels daunting.
Yeah. Well, there's some challenges that are, I think technical challenges. There are some challenges that are process challenges. And there was a lot of things that we discovered early on that were even surprising to us. We were very familiar with the problem that we were trying to address, but some of the things are a lot of people, even in the higher levels of the trucking companies themselves, aren't fully aware of is things like a lot of the transportation management systems don't even rate an order until after it's already been accepted. There's also really no native way within these systems to track their customer contracts. And those are often the two most important criteria for should we take a load or should we not. And that data just wasn't accessible to them. And I liken it to being Nike and posting shoes out for people to purchase, but everybody gets to send in their own purchase price, and you're not aware of it until you decide to fulfill an order. And to me, that was just some basic data blocking and tackling that we had to get ahead of to do the bigger picture things that we wanted to accomplish.
That's completely. I was the same experience for mine. It blew my mind that pricing analysts would work customer RFPs. At
Hmm.
US Express, there was a team of about 5 or 6 and a manager. The problem was every analyst did not always talk to the other analyst, and then you didn't know. So you're always fixing last quarter's or last year's RFP, and you can't even
Yep.
evaluate what a good load is until like 6 months in when you're like, crap, I'm not even
Yeah.
getting what I expected.
Yeah. And, the concept of network is one that's interesting in and of itself. And, we talk about intentionally designing and architecting networks, but really your network is what gets tendered to you at any given point in time. And, in the market that we're in, we see, most companies try to commit maybe 100 to 120% of the capacity committed. And in the market that we're in, the realization on those commitments is typically between 30 and 45%. So you've got a lot of what some folks refer to as ghost lanes. You have a lot of that just never come over in the volumes that you're anticipating. And the broader network effect of that is so significant and nearly impossible to manage at a desk level.
Yeah, no, I saw that firsthand. Market would flip. California, Southern California was such a great example because of commitments, imports, depends on how it comes in. That market could go
Hmm.
from a huge hole in your network to like, I can't get anybody out here. Talk about some of your technology because this is the cool stuff that you're working on. You're using the artificial
Yeah.
intelligence. You're being able to rate the load before you even get it. You can pre-accept it. It's like Minority Report. You can predict if the load's good before you even get it.
That's awesome. So yeah, I mean, there's several pieces, important pieces that go into it, and I think first and foremost, the things that you can't underestimate, and I think it's where other approaches have fallen down in the past, is everybody will use the saying "data in, bad data out," and what we do very, very heavily is focus on the data that gets into the models themselves. So that goes all the way upstream to going to the EDI data, doing your own mappings, doing your own regular expression to extract as much information, understand what the contracts and the tariff rates are, and then from there, understand what capacity is. And we talked about this the other day, but the timing of 2019 was really ideal for us because that was really the effective date of ELD mandate. And although it had been around for quite some time before that, that was really the hard and fast requirement. So there's a tremendous amount of valuable insights that the ELD can unlock. And then the final part of it, you kind of alluded to with Minority Report, which is again awesome, uh, is that what we do is we overlay a 3-week demand forecast of the entire network at the lane level for every OD pair a carrier has ever seen with the revenue attached to it to understand the likely probability of recognizing volumes out of a given area on a given day in a given time. And that allows you to position your capacity around the most profitable things in your network.
That's cool because I've never seen, even when I was a load planner, like operations would be so far when you're at a huge level. I think they ran between 7 and 10,000 loads a week for 2,500 trucks.
Yeah.
You don't even have time to understand
Yeah.
it, like digest that. And what you're doing is you can
Hmm.
actually show the lanes and you can let people visualize, here's how much money you have. And I love the demand thing ahead because we would barely, I told you this, the 9 a.m. call, capacity would fudge for the working tractor percentage before the 9 a.m. call. You would take all
Yeah.
these EDI
Yeah.
tenders, and then when you fixed it, because they actually were in shop that day, so you didn't get yelled at, then you would just screw over your network on a daily basis.
Hmm. Yeah. And I mean, you see just a tremendous amount of interesting things. A lot of folks will say, we'll get a tender that's 5, 6, 7, 10 days out in the future. And we'll get rejection reasons that will say no capacity. And people are trying to understand where that they're going to have trucks in 5 to 7 to 10 days. And at the human level, that's just impossible. And especially when you're dividing your network into either your customer base or into regions, and then you're automatically drawing these arbitrary lines in the network, which makes it impossible to manage. So the abundance of reasons for why people make good or bad decisions is pretty incredible.
And it's so hard to get the data. So I'm kind of curious. Now with the ELD
Mm.
mandate, you have one part of the ingredient that we needed, which was the visibility over the trucks, paired with the loads. When we want to try to
Hmm.
predict that 3 weeks out, do I need to look at all the loads I have over that average, or do I want to overlay that with like that ELD data? Do I just need to see where the trucks actually are versus the loads? Because I get caught up. That's what tripped us up. We'd have situations where theoretically the network should have been good, but then all the trucks are
Hmm.
somewhere else.
Yeah. So it's important to understand not only the loads that a truck is currently on, but also the future loads that have been accepted into the network. So you kind of have your idea of what your natural constraints are. So you've got, this driver needs to do this thing today, and then in this area, there's these other things for them to do. So kind of a byproduct of network balance, if you will. And then from there, it's really, like I said, that demand forecast of where do we need to allocate those trucks then on to make sure that they're landing in a place where you're going to have the right freight. But yeah, to your point, the ELD data is huge because knowing things like hours of service, so when somebody's going to be able to work, how long they can work. TMS integration is crucial because knowing things like certification expirations or when somebody needs to go into shop or when somebody has home time, all of those things give you kind of what your indication of capacity are, both current and future. And without knowing both capacity and demand, it'd be a giant missed opportunity.
Oh, it's nuts. It took me weeks to analyze enough data to find out 3 different areas were having dwell times because of the mismatch between the appointment time scheduled and the capacity.
Hmm.
So no one could figure that out. And I think that assigning a truck to a load, because you also have Freight Science does a cool thing of helping put the right truck on the right load. Talk to us a little bit about that because I worked with AI Fleet, a trucking tech startup that's
Yeah.
doing that with spot stuff, but you're working with a
Hmm.
closed loop net. And I saw a variant try to do it, but it almost feels like what you're working on. It's just some cool stuff.
Yeah. And for me, and this goes back to the 2019 thing, and it's also a kind of a passion project of mine is driver turnover. You know, it's it. They always say the hardest thing about any business is people, and that holds true in trucking as well, if not more than anywhere else. And you have 1,000 unique drivers that all have the things that they want to do, the things that have been committed to them when they were onboarded or recruited to the company. And it's how do we not only meet these obligations to our drivers, but do so in a way that keeps the consistency and service levels our shippers expect in the network while being able to execute all the freight. So for us, that means, working to understand and build out driver profiles, really understanding lanes they want to move, lanes that they don't want to move, locations they can or cannot go to, what their revenue and mileage targets are per week, because not every driver wants to max out their clock. Not every driver wants to max out their compensation. So understanding who those folks are and then making sure that the assignment to the load matches the things as much as possible that they can do while executing the network as quickly and efficiently and as profitably as possible. So it's really taking in not just tractor ELD and load, it's also very much putting the driver at the center of that planning.
That was one thing that when I had doing the variant program, we were struggling because we needed a scorecard. I call it the lawn mower. You have the rabbit or the turtle, and you have to figure out because we'd have the issues. And even at my old startup, I've probably fixed it now, but this was back in 2019 and 20. We would have the tech, but the tech was like turbo rabbit. And then the drivers are like, this is too much work. You're running me too hard. And I was like, no, you're going to make all this money. And they're like, I don't want to do it. And that's so cool.
Exactly.
Like, how did you find that out? Was that something where you just ask them on the pre-assignment, like give them a thumbs up or a thumbs down, like you ran too hard? Or do you just see what they just ran in the past and see if they're just, staying short? And, they had more time, but they just didn't use it.
Yeah. It's a mixture of a lot of things. And a lot of this data lives in the TMS today, but it's in raw nodes. I mean, you have driver managers who communicate with the drivers every single day, and you sit down and you watch them work, and they know what loads, what lanes that somebody wants to execute, and they'll be able to tell you they wouldn't take this load, they wouldn't take that load. So really what it boils down to is just trying to get as much of that stuff that is tribal knowledge into code so you can assist those people to do those jobs better, faster, and get them the right plans. So the best ways to get that data are to either work directly with the driver managers to complete driver profiles, or through mobile applications, which we have, extend it out to the driver and just let them complete surveys and fill out and manage their own schedule.
Does that open the door? Because that was one of my biggest wishes. And I think the coolest part of my job right now, getting to talk to you, talk to people who are doing all this cool stuff that I wish I could have done, but I'm not smart enough. I'm just a talking head. Shippers.
Me neither.
You guys are cooking up some good stuff, though. I wanted to figure out with those surveys. I also mean that I can finally get information on the performance of shippers and receivers. Because as a carrier, what would make me mad is I'd have locations that would throttle my network, hoard my trailers, but I can't really go back to the customer because they're oblivious. They don't even know.
Yeah, well, and there's kind of two sides to that coin. One of them is if they do know, are they willing to do anything about it? But yes, you absolutely can. So, for us, and as you know, and you've been in that planer seat before, there's usually just assumptions that are made for loading and unloading times. If it's a 30-minute, if it's a live unload, it's an hour to 2 hours. If it's a hook, it's 30 minutes. And you use those across the board, but at any location, that's different. So yes, we run, not to use a fancy language, but machine learning models on every single location to tell not only what dwell time is, but what dwell time is at specific times of the day. And that it will actually help companies schedule appointments more effectively to make sure they're maximizing the facilities to the best of their knowledge. But yeah, no, I think, that's a huge opportunity. Real transit time is an opportunity. And the big one that is on our radar that we're working on right now is appointment times. Because I think appointment times are the single biggest constraint that you can add to a truckload network.
Is that kind of the Holy Grail? Because I see a lot of folks, there's, what is it? There was one RIP convoy. They're trying to do a consortium for that, make sure that shippers actually have visibility. Is that something where, I guess, in a future state, instead of just immediately declining the tender, I can also recommend I can do it if you send it back like this?
Yes, for sure. And that's a great call out. And it's also one of the reasons where there are some areas of your network that, automation makes a ton of sense. But because of that human touch that you just mentioned of you can have a dialogue with a shipper, you can get appointment times or even pickup dates moved, that a lot of these things shouldn't be automated, but rather coached on how to influence them in a way that makes the network more effective. But yeah, 100%. And I don't, I think the consortium is interesting. I don't know how much I hope that they're making progress. But what we've done in the interim is start to partner with all of the actual shipper side TMSs. And a lot of these folks do have APIs to allow you to set appointments. It's just being smarter about the appointment times that you need to select.
Yeah, I saw that. That was in the early days. Even when I was a broker and a carrier, it
Mhm.
was like you really had to find that rep who was the next level and thought about it and said, I can still take this. I
Yeah.
know I can set the appointment, and we're just working to automate all
Yep.
that. When we're looking at this stuff, this is mostly contracted in this world, this wild, crazy world, preload, drop, and hook. For the customers you work with, is there a size of carrier? This is what I'm curious about. When they reach a certain
Yeah.
size, is this when I need to get all my stuff on like contract and try to start thinking about these problems?
Um, that's a difficult question. It really is. If I'm a carrier, I want to be as much contract as possible. Um, but let me caveat that with the right contract. And I think, recently Derek Leathers came out and said that they weren't going to take any contracts below profitability. And I believe it was Knight Swift and some others followed suit. And I think that's a tremendous move. Is yes, we want to keep our trucks moving. We want to keep our drivers employed, but how long are we willing to take losses, and how significant of a losses is for the sake of having contracts? So I think that's a really difficult question to answer. If you've got great partners, great shipper partners, I would be 100% contracted. But if you're not getting the volumes or the profitable volumes that you want, you need to be able to have the flexibility to either get out of those contracts or to wait until the time is right to get a contract that meets the requirements of your business.
So I'm thinking you're onto something. A second Holy Grail within the first Holy Grail. One, making sure we're getting the right load at the right time because that caused me enough high blood
How many
pressure. I'm
holy
already
grails
losing
are
most.
there?
Can see the impacts here right now. The second one is if you have 5 or even 50 trucks, you can get in on this, but typically you don't have a seat at the table. You're stuck going through brokers who don't really get access to this, and now you're back at square one. So is
Mhm.
this something where pairing with these shipper TMS and stuff, we may theoretically open the doors to where we can have that small boutique lane where maybe I got 5 trucks, I
For
commit to
sure.
10 loads a week, and that's the future compared to only the big boys get a seat.
For sure. And I think that's a big one. The other thing that was interesting, and I saw, um, give a shout out to Tom Albrecht, did a really great presentation at a couple of events where he mentioned the ratio of salespeople within asset-based companies comparatively to their non-asset peers. And getting a seat at the table, I think a lot of the times is the ability to sell your business effectively. And what I would love to see is more carriers invest heavily on go-to-market strategies and being able to get direct contacts to shippers, because ultimately I think the shippers want those partnerships and those relationships too. It's challenging, but at the same time, I think that's why you're seeing the rapid growth rate in non-asset brokerages over the last couple of years is just purely because their ability to outsell their asset counterparts.
Yeah, I mean, even seeing this, it does feel like the trucking folks at a large enough carrier size, you have sales reps, but they're like well fed. If you need a barnyard
Yeah.
cat, you have to not feed him for a few days if he's going to be a mouser. And that's I'm Southern. I'm just throwing out some folksy wisdom.
I
Looking
love it.
ahead,
Yeah.
we got about 2 minutes left. What's the biggest thing? AI. We got all these buzzwords. Being a freight science, what we're working on. What are you
Mhm.
most excited about coming across next 12, 18 months?
Next 12, 18 months. Honestly, this is going to just be very generic, but I think it's the adoption. I think more companies, for me, AI we try to stay away from AI as much as possible because it's so polarizing. There's been the hype behind it. A lot of it failed to meet expectations. Everybody's also saying that they do AI, which is obviously not true. Um, but for me, it's these tools do work, and they have a meaningful impact on both the scalability and profitability of companies. And for me, I think a trucking company to be able to compete even in the next 2 to 4 years is going to need to make a more scalable organization by leveraging advanced analytics tools like the ones that we're providing. And it's exciting for me because I think we're in the right place right at the time, selfishly. But also it's exciting because I think we're going to have a material impact on the industry and these companies being able to build businesses that are less susceptible to these increasingly volatile market fluctuations. So I think that's the exciting part. And, the scariness of AI, I don't think is real. I think what it is it's going to be the calculator that we have next to our desk to do the hard math problems that take up a bunch of time in the future, and really just let people focus on what this industry has always claimed to be about, which is relationships
Yeah.
and managing customers, managing drivers, and doing important stuff.
Let us get back to the parts that matter. Turning the slow cruise ship of a carrier into a Nimitz-class carrier that can drift. Got a little bit of time, 30 seconds. Folks want to learn more about freight science as well. Get in contact. Best way to find out.
FreightScience.com. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, or just happy to talk to anybody who's got an interest in trucking or logistics, especially anybody who is specifically passionate about helping people who have one of the most difficult jobs in the country to make work easier, happier, and more profitable.
Matt, appreciate your time. Thank you, sir.
Same. Thank you.
That's going to be a wrap for today. Join us next Tuesday. Look for the newsletter. We'll catch you live.